Welcome everyone to the Corporate Housing Hotline. For today's session, we're going to be covering something that's essential for you to be able to scale your business and ultimately grow to where your ultimate financial goal would be. For today's session, we're going to be talking about how to acquire properties with little to no money of your own. So, in terms of the mindset, most people think that you need to have a lot of money, not only for a down payment on a house, for the furnishings that you need to include, for all the business setups, all the different systems that you need to put. That simply is not true. You can actually do this with very little money or no money at all, depending on how you structure your deals. We're going to be covering two case studies. One case study covers one type of a strategy, another case study covers another type of a strategy. Now, the two properties that I'll be showing and the numbers that I'll also be showing, just full disclosure, are for educational purposes only. These are numbers that we have agreed upon with the owners. These are numbers that we're projecting in terms of revenue that we expect, and more or less what the benefits would be for each one of the parties, the owner, the investor, and ourselves. In addition to that, we'll also be covering in regards to how do we actually structure the deal, how it came to be, and why timing really mattered on this one. We'll be talking about some of the pain points that the owner had, as well as some of the gains that they were expecting in terms of being able to work with us depending on the strategy that we were trying to implement with them. How did we actually ended up structuring the deal? I'll actually show you the numbers and how it translates between traditional long-term, arbitrage, and co-hosting numbers, and what that will look like in terms of the projection. So I'll be running through a couple of the numbers that we see behind the scenes, and ultimately what essentially convinces the owner that this is actually a good strategy for not only for themselves and their financial goals, but also for the investor in terms of some of the projections that we were expecting. We'll also talk about how to spot similar opportunities in your market. What are some of the ways that you can connect with this type of individuals that might benefit from your services or from them renting to you and actually partnering with you? So just to kind of get started, the first property that I'll show you, let me share my screen. So this property, 1961 Creek Bank Drive. This property is located in Columbus, Indiana. So let me just kind of show you what that looks like. When it comes down to this property, the owner actually agreed to furnish the property. Now, this property is huge, so it might seem like it doesn't have many things, but just some of the rooms are huge. All right, so just to kind of give you an essence of what the owner ended up doing in terms of the furnishings and some of the things that they added to their property. So these are some of the photos. Here's the living room, kitchen area, and some of the other spaces. Now, this particular property is it's a 2.5. It's 2 stories, so it actually has stairs to go up the stairs. It's almost 3,000 square feet. So this is a huge property. And then it's got actually pretty high ranking school system. We've been doing this business for a little while. We actually been able to connect with other real estate agents in that particular location in Columbus, Indiana. We've been to meetups, we've been able to connect and educate real estate agents, and this actually came through a referral. The owners, this property that they have, they own it outright. They don't really have any mortgage or anything in particular, but they were kind of intrigued in regards to what are some of the different options when it comes down to renting their asset. Essentially, they're at a point where they have kids that are going to college, so they need additional income. And so one of the things that they were thinking is, well, we can rent it long term. We can get that money to us for us to be able to pay the college tuition, room and board, or some of the things when it comes down to that. Now with co-hosting, it's all about the game. What's in it for the property owners? They'll have access to additional capital, and also the properties will be managed professionally. So when it comes down to co-hosting, most of the owners that will actually go for this particular strategy, a lot of it is in regards to the game. With co-hosting, what that means is that if you try to compare long-term to mid-term to short-term, there's some things that come across each one of those different categories of investment, and ultimately which one you decide. I'll walk you through the numbers so you can see why they ended up choosing us as opposed to a long-term rent. And then for short-term rent, I won't cover that in too much detail, but just know that they didn't they didn't necessarily want to be involved with the days in and days out of quick turnover. So out of the gate, short-term rental wasn't going to work for them. So they were either considering long-term or mid-term, and I'll walk you through kind of what those numbers look like. In terms of the method, like I mentioned, we're co-hosting this property. What that means is that we're partnered with the homeowner to manage the property on their behalf. There's different levels of services. They actually chose the highest level of service that we provide, which essentially makes the property management pretty passive to them with the systems and recommendations that we recommend to them. Now, in terms of the entry for us, we actually didn't have to really pay anything. Now, this is a service that we provide, so really there's no investment besides a little bit of time, providing recommendations, advice, and things like that. But ultimately, a lot of the work that gets done by the homeowner. Now, they can decide to hire us to do the design or other additional services, but that will come at an extra service fee. But when it comes down to the recommendations, we already have systems, we have templates, we have checklists to help the homeowner get the property up and ready within a couple of weeks, as soon as they sign the co-hosting agreement with us. Now, this particular property took about a month or so for the homeowners to get the property ready and up to our standard. Just because it was the holidays and this was around December, so it delayed a little bit longer than what we expected, but ultimately they got it done. Now, in terms of what ultimately they ended up spending, I'll keep the numbers pretty simple. It was actually a little bit more than this, more than $15,000, but just to kind of keep it simple and just for us to do comparisons between the two different strategies, we'll kind of keep it at this level for right now. Now, like I mentioned, full disclosure, this is all for educational purposes. The numbers that they have might not be like yours. And so ultimately, there's no guarantees in terms of performance, income, or results. This is just based on the results that we have gotten with our own properties, as well as working with the owners in this particular situations may not apply to you. So now that we've gotten that disclosure out of the way, let me run through a couple of numbers. Now, in terms of the story, let's say that we're to consider, we're going to go ahead and rent this long term. They're just going to do traditional long term. And essentially for this property now, they own it outright. They don't really have a mortgage on it. But if we were to estimate based on the value of the property, if they were to get a mortgage today, more or less, this is what the number we estimate it would be. Now, in terms of the monthly rent, what they were thinking is they're going to rent it for around 1,700. Now, this is a pretty large home. It's a 2.5, almost 3,000 square feet. So for them to rent it at around 1,700, it just means that actually the local market wasn't as good. So this is kind of what the baseline is for this particular property in that area, in that location. Now, if they were to go long-term and hire a property management company, they would take roughly about 10%, which is about $170 a month. And so what that ultimately meant is they would have a net cash flow of about 130. Now, since they own it outright, that will actually be more, like about 1,530. But in general, a lot of people don't own the home. It hasn't been paid off. So this is just for illustration purposes, where their cash flow, just net cash flow, if they did have a mortgage, it would be roughly $130 a month. Now, they do understand that there's repairs that need to happen to the home, which ultimately if you have to change or make some big repairs, $130 a month isn't really gonna cut it. And so ultimately they might be losing money. So when we had that conversation, that was a real concern that they had. And so when I spoke to them about the option of midterm rental, I walked them through some of the things that we would do as a co-host company to ensure that they have a pretty good results. When it comes down to going midterm, there's three different levels that you need to always consider, especially when you're talking to owners. There's a conservative route. These are likely where you rent, like you could rent it by the room to interns and maybe make some money. The likely version, which is essentially you renting to corporate travelers, travel nurses, executives, people that are going through. When it comes down to whenever you're pitching co-hosting to the property owner, you need to be able to do some kind of analysis in regards to what the break-even point would be for the homeowner. Now, in this case, we estimated that their mortgage would be around 1,400, and that we expected with this house being a larger home that it would take about $700 a month to cover all utilities and services for the home. So that would include electricity, water, sewer, gas, internet, landscaping, all those different services would take about $700 a month, give or take. Now, those would be variable, but in general, we expect that around $700 a month would be spent in the property itself. What that means is that about $2,100 a month would be spent no matter what. So what that means is that we need to be able to say what the conservative number would be, what our likely number would be, and also what a potential goal would be in terms of some aggressive goal that we could have. Aggressive goals typically land with like insurance relocation claims, which pay quite a bit of a premium. So if we do end up landing some of those contracts, then we might have a pretty good net cash flow when it comes down to those numbers. And ultimately the homeowner would benefit for those. As opposed to rental arbitrage, where they get capped at an amount that we agree upon with co-hosts, and they actually gain access to that additional revenue that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. So in terms of the conservative numbers, what we're looking at is 3,500. Likely it's about 4,200, and then aggressive with insurance claims likely around 5,500 a month. So what that means is that once we take into consideration their mortgage, their utilities, and what they would be paying us a month, this is what's left to the owner. Okay, so what that means is that roughly we'll be getting paid conservatively around $500 a month, likely around $700 to $800 a month, and then if we get some of those insurance relocation claims, likely over $1,000, almost $1,200 a month. So this is what we would be getting paid as a partner, as a co-host to the homeowner. In terms of the homeowner, this is if you compare just the conservative projections to what we expect in terms of long-term, this is about 7 times their long-term cash flow. So that's a huge benefit for them. What that means is that the money that they're putting into furnishing and the trust that they have for us to co-host for them is going to 7x their long-term rates. What that means is that, for example, you will need 7 homes performing pretty similar to this just to get the same results. So think about that. Like you need to put a down payment for 7 properties just to get the same results as one. They were sold. When it comes down to like the value add that it comes down to homeowners, there's really 3 things in terms of co-hosting. Number 1, they get a lot better long-term cash flow compared to long-term. In this case, they're getting 7 times the cash flow. The other thing is they have less headaches. You are professionally managing it for them. You are their source of advice. You are their expert, and you are their guide to ensure that the property stays performing year round. So when it comes down to thinking about all those in and outs and where you're going to get clients, they don't really have to worry about that too much. You are their source of expertise, and they rely on you. So when it comes down to those headaches, it's less headaches. Obviously, there's a little bit of anxiety just because they might be new to this, but ultimately you can give them confidence based on your experience and the connections that you have in your local market. In addition to that, they have higher quality tenants. Comparing to some of the applicants that they've been getting in terms of the long-term tenants that have been applying, the quality of the guests is better. The payments are backed by companies. A lot of them are insured. In addition to that, we have the damage protection insurance on top of that. So there's a couple layers of protection that ultimately give the homeowners confidence to say, I trust you. I know you're going to have high quality tenants. So let's go ahead and do this. It's all about the gain for the homeowner. Not only are they providing you the investment in terms of the housing, but they're also investing with you in terms of the furnishings. So obviously that's an upfront capital investment that they need to have. In this case, it's roughly about $15,000 additional dollars that they put in. And so ultimately you want to be able to have a confidence to say how quickly is the return on investment that you put in going to get back to you in terms of additional cash flow. Okay, so what that means is that if we were to take the monthly cash flow, how quickly is that money going to get back in their pocket in terms of the initial investment for the furnishings? For example, in year 1, if we were to take the conservative approach when it comes down to the net cash flow paid to them, it would be roughly around $11,000 for year 1. Now, assuming these numbers actually pan out. What that means is that if you take the initial investment, if you divide the actual revenue by the 50,000, what that means is that roughly they're going to get a 72, 73% ROI. In terms of payback period, roughly you're talking about 2 years, a little bit more than a year or so that they get that money back. And then afterwards, it just pays for itself. They don't have to do additional cash contributions for furnishings. Obviously, they might have to do that down the road to replace a couple of things, but in general, the initial investment is there and it would get paid back in roughly about 2 years. More than likely, I'll get paid back within 1.3 years at 109% ROI for that initial investment in terms of net revenue. And then if we were to get like an insurance relocation claim pretty much year round, that would get paid within less than a year. So in terms of the benefit to the owner, not only are they getting 7 times long-term rate in terms of the cash flow, they also have less headaches because they can rely on you and your expertise and the high quality of guests that you're bringing, depending on how well their performance is, pretty high return compared to if they were to invest that $15,000 into the stock market, which roughly is about 7 to 9%, or if they were to put that into the bank account, which is paying like 0.01% year round. So this gives them an alternative investment route where they can actually put it back into into their house and ultimately make additional income for their goals. In this particular case, they're trying to put their kids through college. So this additional revenue, this additional $900 to $2,000 a month will definitely help. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch gears. Now, in this particular case, for the second property, we're doing rental arbitrage. Rental arbitrage is more in regards to a property owner that's coming through with pain. As we have an investor, we've actually met him for a couple of times. We've connected with him. We've gone through a couple of real estate investment meetups as well. But essentially, the person that's coming through here, as opposed to co-hosting, which is all about gain and having additional cash flow, you have that opportunity for you to make money for them. In terms of rental arbitrage, it's all about pain. It's like, how can you reduce my pain in terms of stress, having really bad tenants, having to, maybe if they have tenants that aren't paying on time, maybe they're trashing the property all the time. So ultimately, in this situation, the homeowner, he was able to quickly find out is that either the tenants always call him all the time, there were issues with the property, for whatever little thing, the tenants were calling him, and so he would spend a lot of his time with his tenants as opposed to spending time with his family or his work, or maybe doing something else that he would enjoy to do. He really wasn't making a whole lot of money in terms of cash flow, just because he wanted to keep good tenants. He didn't want to have too much vacancy. So for this particular investor, it's more about security, is making sure that they have good quality tenants that aren't trashing his property. And even though he's not making a lot of money, he rather rent it to a company that's gonna bring in high quality tenants, is gonna keep an eye out in the property. For us, we do a lot of the property management ourselves, which means that we're changing filters. We are keeping track of our guests and making sure that they're taken care of. If there's an issue with maintenance, we quickly take care of it. We're saving time to the landlord for him to do other things that he enjoys as opposed to just being on the beck and call of his tenants. So when it comes down to the actual quality of the tenants that were applying to his property, they weren't really good. What that meant is that in terms of qualifications, the tenants that were applying either had pretty low credit score, the income was pretty low. In addition to that, maybe they have some some evictions, maybe some criminal records. So there was the applicants that are coming in are really good in terms of the quality that he was looking for his particular properties. So by connecting with us, we talk to him about the people that we bring in, the quality of the tenants, that a lot of the responsibility was actually built back into the businesses. Even though he's renting it to us and we're not going to live in the property, the quality of the guests that we bring in is pretty high. And so ultimately, what for him is he doesn't want to have any vacancies. He doesn't want to have his house being trashed by anyone, and ultimately he wants to be able to spend time with his family as opposed to spending time with his tenants. So when it comes down to this property, this property is 2024 Shadow Creek Boulevard, also in Columbus, Indiana. This particular property, like I mentioned, it's in the rental arbitrage scenario. We're trying to give the investors times back. We're trying to reduce his headache and ultimately being able to guarantee at least the initial 12 months. So what that means is that regardless if the property is vacant or not, we're still guaranteeing the payment, and ultimately we'll be making those payments out to him in a monthly basis. So this is what the property looks like. And we actually got an investor to partner with us. So I'll walk you through that as well. And kind of what the numbers look. So this is what the master room looks like, kitchen, as well as the dining room as well. So a lot of the furniture that you see here in this property, a lot of this was provided by the investors in either actual furnishings or capital to purchase these items as well. decorations, and all the different systems that you see here, were all provided by that investor in terms of actual product or money for us to source those products and place them in the house. So this is what it looks like. And so just to kind of go over the numbers, shadow quick, and let me zoom in a little. Here's a link for that as well. So in terms of this strategy, like I mentioned, it's rental arbitrage. In this case, the amount of money that we have to put in was for the security deposit, which is refundable. And we had a concession where the landlord agreed that we would be able to pay this over the term of the lease. So we would have essentially 12 months to pay this amount in full. Now, in terms of the actual value, like I said, I wanted to keep it simple for just illustration purposes only. This was actually a little bit more than $15,000 when it comes down to the furnishings, but just to kind of keep the illustration between the two, we'll go ahead and keep it at 15,000 when it comes down to the total value of the furniture, the core systems, all those different things. Now, in terms of the landlord, one of the things that you need to help the landlord understand is that ultimately he's renting out long term, whether it's through you as someone that's going to do the arbitrage and then ultimately sublease, or someone that's going to rent it long term, just a traditional family coming in. When it comes down to the management of the property, obviously he could essentially spend a lot of time himself, which is what he ended up doing. But he was actually consider whether to hire just a traditional agency and just for them to rent it for him long term. So what that means is that ultimately real estate agents or agencies will charge you based on gross revenue that they can get for on a monthly basis. Now, in this case, he was thinking, we'll probably rent it for 1,750. And then if I pay the 10%, which is usually a pretty average when it comes down to management fee for a property management company, he would pay around $175 a month for that management company. Now, his mortgage, he actually has a mortgage on this one. It's around 1,430. What that means is that ultimately he'll cash flow about $145 a month. If they were to rent it to us, we actually can pay a little bit above market rent. So we actually ended up paying 1,770, so about $20 more than what he would be getting in the normal market. In addition to that, we don't charge a management fee. So when it comes down to the actual guests that we bring in, the guest experience, we handle all that. We change filters, we do the landscaping services, all the different services are already covered. When it comes down to any maintenance requests, we handle all of that. He doesn't have to worry about that. The only communication or the only reason why we would reach out to him is like if the roof starts to cave in, or if they're mishap when it comes down to like the big systems. You're talking about electricity, plumbing, HVAC system, roofing, all those different systems are the ones where we would actually reach out to him. But that's because we have to. But all the other services, we would essentially let him know, hey, this happened. We already go ahead and took care of it. You don't have to worry about it. And we would already handle that beforehand. So that besides saving him time, since he doesn't have to pay the management fee, he instantly 2x's his long-term revenue when it comes down to his cash flow. So in this case, now he's making 340, so essentially 2x his long-term rate, and then it's a lot more passive to him. So when it comes down to what's value add whenever you're having conversations with landlords that are looking to possibly rent the properties to you through arbitrage, is you're giving them a value add where they're 2xing their revenue. That they have less headaches. It's something that's way more passive. They don't have to worry about it too much. The quality of the tenants is really high. That the vacancy doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter because the vacancy is on you. That risk gets passed on to you. So regardless if the property gets rented or not, you're still guaranteeing that payment, and ultimately you're paying that the monthly rate to the landlord. So if the house sits empty for a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, you're still on the hook to make those payments. Now, this gives a layer of security. So not only are they making more money, it's less passive, and then they don't have to worry about vacancy because ultimately you're guaranteeing the 12-month lease. And then after that, if everything works well, more than likely we will end up doing a 2 to 3 up to 5-year lease extension. So they have that expectation that we actually are here for the long term. We're going to be putting up $15,000 worth of furniture. So we want to be in the property for a long time, at least until our money gets paid back and then some. Now, in terms of the investor that worked with us, the partner that actually went in 50-50 with us, we're still doing those projections, right? What's the conservative, what's likely, and then what's the aggressive projection when it comes down to that. Now for us, now this property is relatively in the same neighborhood as the other one, so more or less we try to keep it the same just for illustration purposes only. Now the other property is bigger, so more than likely it will fetch a little bit more than what we were expecting here. But this one is actually furnished a lot nicer for some of the executives that we were bringing in. Now, when it comes down to the monthly expenses, obviously we have the revenue that we would have to pay the landlord. This the PITI wouldn't apply to us. So for this case, what we're doing is we're including here the monthly rent that we would be paying. So in this agreement, we decided we're going to go ahead and pay $1,770. And then now this, because it's a smaller property, that is not going to take as much energy to keep it going. Water, sewer, all those things are going to be a little bit less. So we were to compare it to the other one, 700 versus 500. That's the reason why. It's because this property is actually about half the size of the other one. So in this case, our break-even number is around 2,270. So let's just say $2,300 a month. What we expect to make from this property a month, conservatively, it's around $1,200 up to $3,200 a month, depending on how conservative or aggressive we come in. So what that means is that ultimately in year one, we expect to bring in revenue. It's about $15,000, $23,000, up to $38,000 per year. Now, keep in mind, we are only coming in at $1,770. So essentially, within the first month or two, we get investment back, and then afterwards, we're just paying that out of the cash flow or whatever remains for the additional months. Now, we don't get to keep all this money. We essentially get to keep half, but even half, 14,000, almost 15,000, is pretty good on an investment of $1,770. Now, half of that will actually go to the investor, right? So this is a person that believes in our business model, essentially has capital sitting around, and this particular person has actually done some deals with us in the past, and they actually had some money just sitting around. So we talked to them about being a partner with us, where essentially they would get into this deal and they would get 50% of the net profits if they were to fund the furniture for us. So what that means is that this $15,000, we don't have to pay ourselves from the cash flow of other properties. This actually comes from an investor that has not really doing anything. And ultimately, I'll walk through some of those projections in terms of ROI returns here. If you were to take the long-term net cash flow and then divide it by 2, these are the numbers that you would get. This is what we expect to pay that investor, the upfront, the $15,000 worth of furniture. So what that means in terms of ROI, if you take the long-term net cash flow that we expect to pay him and divide it by the 15,000 initial investment for year one, we expect that essentially that would be about 50% ROI compared to maybe 7 or 9% in the stock market or 0.01 sitting in their bank account. Now, what that means in terms of payback is that roughly within 2 years or so, that initial investment to the furniture will be paid. And then afterwards, it's just infinite return. So essentially, he will get paid back again and again and again, as long as he does furnishings invested within the projects that we have for this property. If we were to go in the likely route, more than likely, he'll get his investment back within 1.4 years. And then if we end up getting some insurance relocation claims, a lot of the money would actually be within a year. So what that means is that essentially he has to have this money invested with the furniture for about 2 years to break even, and then afterwards it's just additional revenue that he would be bringing in. So conservatively, it's roughly around $600 a month that he would be making passively. Now, we would be managing the property. He doesn't really have to do anything besides just collect his paycheck afterwards. The benefit for him is that he would have to wait about a year or two to get his money back for the initial furniture. Once it's in place, he would essentially mail money for the risk that he initially took. Now, he can do this as many times as in additional opportunities as well. Just kind of close off as well. I know we're coming up to the end, so this is just additional information when it comes down to some of the agreements and some of the agreements that we put in place. As you can see here, this is a co-hosting agreement that we put in place. The date is December 16, 2025. We're homeowner for the property at 1961 Creekbank Avenue. Now, we expect to keep this property for all of 2026. And then as you can see here, it was signed by the owners. So this is something that you will need to have. When it comes down to the rental arbitrage, there's two documents that you need to have. Besides the rental agreement, you also need to have an addendum. It's not showing here, but essentially that would be an additional part to your rental agreement. But essentially, as you can see here, we came to an agreement in December 2025 for the 2024 Shadow Creek Boulevard, which actually we just went live with it, and we expect to have it all of 2026 at around $1,700 per month in terms of the monthly rate. So as you can see here, we are the tenants in this case. My partner Evelyn signed off on that one. And then there's an additional addendum that if you join our premium program, you would have access to all those documents as well. The other thing that you would gain access to is the joint venture agreements that we have in place. As you can see here, this is a joint venture agreement that we came into an agreement on the same date as the lease was signed, essentially detailing out that we would have the operating partner, which is us, and what our responsibility would be, as well as a capital partner and what his responsibility would be, kind of what the ownership would be of the joint venture, and ultimately saying like we're 50-50 partners, so whatever net income that comes in, we'll split it half and half. As you can see, this is where we went ahead and signed that document. So this is just additional illustration that there's documents that need to be put in place for your protection, as well as the homeowners and the partners that you have to ensure there's visibility and clear expectations in regards to who is going to do what. What I wanted to show here is not for bragging or anything like that. Essentially, what I'm trying to illustrate here is like you don't need to have a lot of money to go into this business and to have control properties. You just need to have the know-how and the knowledge for you to be able to. For co-hosting, we're providing a service. There's really no investment from us. We're providing the guidance to the homeowner for them to furnish the property and ultimately get it up to our standards and for what our customers are looking for. And even though there's no investment of actual money, there's an investment of time, of expertise, of connections. So ultimately, we're getting paid for our expertise and our services. So with that mindset, you can come in into those deals with zero money out of pocket. On the other route, essentially, we make a connection here. We're solving a problem. We're also providing some gain to an investor that's able to come in and give us money. And by solving that problem, we're able to connect two parties that wouldn't have been involved otherwise, and we're able to make money on the spread. So what that means is the homeowner gets a problem solved. The investor also gets a problem solved when it comes down to like the return on investment. Now, in this case, we did put a little bit of money when it comes down to the security deposit, but that security deposit, it's refundable. So ultimately, we came into the deal with zero money out of pocket because we are going to be paying that over the term of the lease. And really, that money is going to be paid through the cash flow. So really, we're coming in $0 out of pocket when it comes down to either one of those opportunities. Now you have to decide, is it something that you're going to be sitting around waiting for others to give you permission to do, or is it something that you can leverage able to make deals work for you? This is Jorge with the Corporate Housing Hotline, and I'll see you in the next one.